This is OwlUp, where learning happens in minutes, not hours. For a deeper journey, explore all our courses at owlup.co. Now, let's dive in. Welcome back to Chapter 2 of our series, Think Like a Historian. In today's episode, titled Primary versus Secondary Sources, Evaluating Historical Evidence, we'll explore the essential differences between these two types of sources and how they shape our understanding of history. So, whether you're a budding historian or just curious about the past, let's dive in. Only about 1 in 6 teenagers can reliably tell an online ad from a news story. Now zoom out. Courts, textbooks, documentaries, family stories, all built on evidence. But which pieces are eyewitness voices, and which are someone else's spin masquerading as fact? Historians face this problem constantly, but with higher stakes. Label a shaky memoir as solid proof, and you can distort an entire era. Treat a careful archive-based study as if it's just another opinion, and you throw away decades of work. The first step out of this tangle is learning to tell what kind of thing you're holding in your hands. In practice, that often means sorting between two broad categories of historical evidence. One comes straight from the time and people you're studying. The other is produced later, by someone looking back. Both matter, but they answer different questions and carry different risks. And then there's the modern twist. A 14th century tax roll might now sit one click away from a 2020 blog post about it, flattened into the same browser window, jostling for your trust. Open a search page on any big event, say the fall of a government or the signing of a peace deal, and you'll see everything jumbled together. Leaked cables, think tank reports, live tweet threads, scholarly articles, grainy videos, memoirs, conspiracy posts. They arrive as a single, endless scroll, but they weren't created for the same reasons, under the same pressures, or with the same audiences in mind. To think like a historian, you start separating the voices at the table. Who was in the room, who arrived decades later, and who's just repeating what they heard. Think first about timing and distance. A diary entry from a soldier written between battles, a diplomatic cable sent during a crisis, an audio recording of a protest. Those are produced within the heat or immediate aftermath of events. A textbook chapter, a 1990s documentary about a 1940s war, or a blog post summarizing archival letters are all looking back from a safer distance. That distance cuts both ways. The closer you are to an event, the more vivid the detail, but the more likely confusion, fear, or propaganda will color what's recorded. The farther away you are, the more context and comparison you can gain, but also the more you risk smoothing out the rough edges and quirks that made the original situation so uncertain. Now layer in purpose. Lorenzo Valla analyzed the language of the donation of Constantine not just to be clever, but to test a claim that underpinned papal authority. When he spotted words and grammar that didn't exist in Constantine's time, he wasn't only catching a forgery, he was revealing how power can wrap itself in invented antiquity. In the 19th century, Leopold von Ranke pushed scholars to ask these kinds of questions systematically. Who created this, for whom, and why? Then there's consistency. A single letter saying, "The king was beloved by all," is interesting. 10 independent tax records showing towns trying to escape royal levies tell a different story. When internal details line up, names, dates, sums, and when different kinds of materials agree, say court transcripts and shipping logs both indicating shortages, your confidence grows. When they clash, the gaps themselves become clues. Who had reason to mislead, or simply didn't know? The digital layer complicates things again. A scanned 1863 letter on a National Archive site sits next to a modern podcast episode discussing it. Both are only a tap away, and both can be screenshot, remixed, and shared. But one lets you scrutinize the original handwriting and phrasing. The other curates and frames it, sometimes without telling you what was left out. With digitization projects placing tens of millions of such items online, the real skill is no longer access, it's discrimination. Your job, thinking like a historian, is to move past, "Is this online?" toward, "When was this made? Under what pressures? How does it align, or clash, with everything else we know?" Start with something close to home, your own phone. Scroll back to messages from last week about a stressful moment, a family argument, a missed deadline. Those texts, voice notes, and time-stamped photos act like tiny time capsules. If you later write a reflective journal entry this weekend about how the week went, that reflection is already a step removed, shaped by hindsight, mood, and what you now know happened afterward. Historians do something similar when they contrast, say, a statesman's hurried wartime telegrams with their polished memoirs decades later. The telegrams might be chaotic, incomplete, even wrong about key facts. The memoir smooths and stitches those fragments into a story that makes sense, sometimes too much sense. Here's where your critical reading comes in. Instead of asking, which is true, try, what could this kind of document reliably tell me, and what is it likely to distort? Your interpretation shifts from hunting for perfect accuracy to mapping patterns of bias, blind spots, and perspective. AI tools that flag edits in images or trace stylistic fingerprints in text will sharpen how we tell apart forged and authentic traces, much as microscopes transformed medicine. But synthetic records tailored to our preferences could flood the zone, making the most polished item on your screen the least trustworthy. Civic life may depend on treating every viral clip like a sudden storm front, checking where it formed, how fast it's moving, and who stands to benefit if you don't look twice. As you practice, you may find yourself treating daily life like a quiet archive, receipts as clues to habit, overheard comments as tiny oral histories, your calendar as a map of shifting priorities. The goal isn't to turn everything into a court case, but to cultivate a gentle, probing curiosity. Less, is this true? And more, what story is this capable of telling? Here's your challenge this week. Pick one historical event you care about, for example, the Boston Tea Party or the Montgomery bus boycott, and find two primary sources, like a newspaper from that year, a photograph, a diary entry, or a government document, and two secondary sources, like a textbook chapter, a documentary segment, or a historian's article about it. Create a simple two-column comparison, primary versus secondary, and, for each source, jot down who created it, when, why, and what perspective or bias you notice. Then decide which one primary source you'd trust most and which one secondary source you'd trust most to explain the event to a friend, and write a one-sentence reason for each choice. This was OwlUp, your daily step forward. To keep learning with structured courses and more insights, go to owlup.co. Until tomorrow!